Chapter 1. The Echo of Laughter. The metallic jingle of my keys seemed to shriek in the quiet of my apartment that evening. It had been a truly splendid night, and a faint smile still softened my lips as I shrugged off my coat. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Sarah. "Just home," her text read, followed by a playful emoji. A soft chuckle escaped me, resonating in the empty space, and I thumbed a swift reply. Setting my phone down, a different sound pierced the stillness, the distinct heavy thud of boots in the hallway, followed by a tentative knock. My smile faltered. Only one person knocked like that. I unlatched the door to find Tyler, a six-pack of craft beer dangling from one hand. His dark hair clung damply to his forehead, likely from a post-shift shower, and his uniform shirt lay unbuttoned at the throat. He looked drawn, the lines around his eyes etched deeper than usual. "Hey," he rasped, his gaze sweeping over me, lingering a beat too long on my still glowing expression. "Thought you'd be back. Got off early." "Oh, hey, Ty," I managed, striving for nonchalance, despite the sudden warmth rising in my cheeks. "Yeah, just walked in." I stepped aside, a familiar gesture ushering him into the apartment. He always brought beer. We always chatted a while, usually about some dramatic rescue or mundane firehouse anecdote. Tonight, however, felt different. The lingering scent of my cologne mingled with a whisper of Sarah's perfume in the air. Would he notice? He set the beers on the kitchen counter with a dull thud. "You were out?" he asked, his voice low, almost flat, as he vaguely gestured at my slightly rumpled shirt. "Yeah, actually," I admitted, trying to sound breezy. "Dinner with Sarah." The name felt new on my tongue in his presence, unfamiliar and a little thrilling. Tyler stopped mid-reach for a bottle opener. His hand froze, then slowly dropped to his side. He turned to face me. His eyes, usually so warm and full of life, now seemed clouded, unreadable. "Sarah?" he repeated, the single word stretched thin. "Yeah, Sarah. From the gallery opening last month, remember?" I tried to jog his memory, though. He'd only been there for about 10 minutes before a call pulled him away. Red hair, really passionate about abstract art. He simply stared, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Right," he said, but his tone belied any actual recollection. "So, dinner. Yeah, it was great. Really great, actually." I found myself prattling a little, wanting to share the details, yet sensing a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a sudden chill unrelated to the evening breeze. She's incredibly easy to talk to." Tyler finally retrieved a beer, popping the cap with a decisive hiss. He took a long swig, his gaze fixed on the condensation beating on the bottle. "Good for you, Marcus," he said, his voice utterly devoid of genuine enthusiasm. "Glad you had a nice time." The words felt less like congratulations, and more like a thinly veiled dismissal. A prickle of annoyance stirred within me. "Is everything all right, Ty? You seem a bit off." He met my gaze then, and for a fleeting moment I glimpsed something raw and unsettling in his eyes. A flicker of what looked suspiciously like hurt, quickly masked. "Just tired," he mumbled, taking another long drink. "Long shift. Some geniuses tried to deep fry a turkey indoors. I let it go, though the explanation felt hollow. We discussed his shift for a while, the usual back and forth, but the easy rhythm we typically shared was gone. A new, unspoken barrier had solidified between us. When he finally rose to leave, the six-pack barely touched, he paused at the door. "So, this, Sarah," he said, his hand already on the doorknob. "Is this a thing now?" The bluntness of the question startled me. "I hope so," I admitted, a genuine smile reclaying my face. "I really like her, Ty." He didn't return the smile. His expression remained stubbornly blank. He simply nodded once, a curt, almost imperious gesture, and then he was gone, the click of the lock echoing the hollow feeling he'd left behind. The scent of Sarah's perfume in the air no longer felt sweet. It felt like a challenge. The echo of my earlier laughter now sounded almost mocking. The next few days blurred into a flurry of texts with Sarah, another dinner, and the burgeoning excitement of a new romance. Tyler, meanwhile, became a phantom. His usual impromptu visits ceased. My calls went straight to voicemail, or were met with terse monosyllabic replies about being swamped. I attempted to attribute it to his demanding job, but a knot of unease began to tighten in my stomach. Then, a week later, I encountered him at the local grocery store. I was pushing my cart, humming a little tune, when I rounded an aisle and nearly collided with his broad chest. He wore civilian clothes, a faded t-shirt, cargo shorts, and looked less fatigued, but also more guarded. "Ty!" I exclaimed, genuinely pleased to see him. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you." He shifted his weight, his eyes darting around the crowded aisle as if seeking an escape route. "Busy," he repeated, the same vague answer. He clutched a package of ground beef like a lifeline. "Too busy for your best friend?" I tried to inject some lightness into my voice, but it felt forced. His gaze finally settled on me, and this time, its intensity was startling. "Friend?" he asked, a bitter edge to his tone. "Is that what we are, Marcus? Just friends?" My brows furrowed. "Of course we're friends, Ty. What else would we be?" The question hung in the air, thick and uncomfortably heavy. He just stared at me, his eyes searching mine, as if looking for an answer I didn't possess. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of us, surrounded by the mundane sounds of shopping. "Nothing," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, a muscle jumping in his jaw. "Nothing at all." He turned abruptly, abandoning his half-empty cart, and walked away without another word, disappearing into the throng of shoppers. I stood there, bewildered, the echo of his strange question reverberating in my ears, and for the first time, a cold dread began to settle deep within my chest. Something was profoundly wrong. Chapter 2. A fading smile. The clatter of forks against ceramic plates in the bustling cafe usually soothed Marcus, but today it grated. Across the small table, Leo's laugh, light and easy, was a pleasant counterpoint to the city's hum. Marcus found himself smiling, a genuine warmth spreading through him that felt both novel and comforting. He had almost forgotten what it was like, this effortless connection. His phone buzzed, vibrating against his thigh. He glanced down, seeing Tyler's name flash across the screen. A quick text, "Hey, how's your day off?" Marcus hesitated, then typed a brief reply. "Good. Catching up with a friend." He slipped the phone back into his pocket, a faint unease prickling at him. Later that evening, after he'd walked Leo back to his apartment, the unease solidified into something heavier. He unlocked his own door to find Tyler perched on his sofa, an unlit beer in his hand. The air in the apartment felt thick, charged. "Hey," Marcus said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Didn't know you were coming over." Tyler didn't look up immediately. He traced the condensation ring on the beer bottle with a finger. "Just thought I'd swing by. You didn't pick up my call." His voice was flat, devoid of its usual booming warmth. "I was out," Marcus replied, shrugging off his jacket. "With Leo." Tyler's head snapped up. His eyes, usually so clear and direct, were clouded. "Leo? The new guy?" "He's not the new guy, Tyler. He's a friend. We had lunch." Marcus walked to the kitchen, needing the distance. He poured himself a glass of water, his back to Tyler. "Lunch, huh?" There was a sharp edge to Tyler's tone. "You seem to be spending a lot of time with this friend lately." Marcus turned, setting his glass down with a thud. "What's the problem, Tyler? I'm allowed to have friends." Tyler stood, his broad shoulders filling the doorway between the living room and kitchen. "Yeah, but this isn't like your other friends. You're different when you talk about him." A tight knot formed in Marcus's stomach. Different how? Tyler just stared, his jaw clenched. The silence stretched, taut and uncomfortable. Finally, he shook his head, a frustrated sigh escaping him. "Doesn't matter. I should go." He left as abruptly as he'd arrived, the heavy thud of his boots echoing down the hallway. The next few days were a strange dance of avoidance and clipped conversations. Tyler was always there, a looming presence, whether it was at their regular coffee spot or when their shifts overlapped. His usual easy banter with Marcus was replaced by a watchful silence. his gaze following Marcus with an intensity that made Marcus's skin crawl. One afternoon, Marcus was helping Leo move a new bookshelf into his apartment. They were laughing, struggling with a particularly awkward angle, when the doorbell rang. Marcus opened it to find Tyler leaning against the doorframe, a package in his hand. "Forgot to drop this off at your place," Tyler said, his eyes flicking from Marcus to Leo, who was still trying to wrestle the bookshelf into position. "Oh, thanks," Marcus said, taking the package. "This is Leo, by the way. Leo, this is Tyler." Leo, red-faced from exertion, offered a friendly smile and a wave. "Hey, man, nice to meet you." Tyler barely acknowledged him, his gaze fixed on the bookshelf, then back to Marcus. "Looks like you're busy." "Just helping out," Marcus said, feeling the air thicken again. Tyler lingered for another moment, his eyes scanning the apartment, then back to Leo with a cold, assessing look. "Right. Well, I'll let you two get back to it." He turned and walked away, his posture stiff, leaving behind a palpable chill. Leo, a moment later, turned to Marcus, a puzzled frown on his face. "Is he always like that?" Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "He can be a bit intense." He knew it was an understatement, but he couldn't articulate the unsettling shift he was witnessing in his friend. Tyler's once vibrant smile, usually so readily given, was fading, replaced by a brooding intensity that Marcus couldn't quite decipher. It was a tension that felt both personal and deeply confusing, a tightening coil within their long-standing friendship that threatened to snap. Chapter 3. Uncomfortable Jokes. The clatter of cutlery against ceramic was the loudest sound in the small kitchen, broken only by the occasional clink of ice in Tyler's glass. He sat across from me at the island, his gaze fixed on some point beyond my left shoulder, a posture he'd adopted more frequently over the past few weeks. My phone, face down beside my plate, had just buzzed with a text from Liam, a silly gif that made me smile. "Liam again." Tyler's voice was flat, devoid of its usual playful lilt. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. "Yeah, he just sent me a picture of a cat wearing a tiny sombrero." I chuckled, turning the phone to show him. Tyler barely glanced at it. Hilarious. The sarcasm was a cold, sharp edge. "You two are really hitting it off, huh? Lots of cat memes, I guess." The air in the kitchen, already thick with the scent of my slightly burnt toast, seemed to congeal. "We are," I confirmed, my voice a little too bright. "He's really nice, Tyler. And funny." Tyler finally met my eyes, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. "Funny, huh? What kind of funny? Like dad jokes funny? Or actually funny?" He leaned forward, elbows on the counter, a mock-serious expression on his face. "Because you know, Marcus, you have a very specific sense of humor, easily amused by the mundane." I felt a flush creep up my neck. "He's a good guy. We have a lot in common." "Like what? Your shared love of artisanal cheeses?" Tyler's lip curled slightly. It was an uncomfortable joke, one that felt less like teasing and more like a thinly veiled jab. I'd mentioned Liam's passion for gourmet food, and now it was a weapon. I put my phone down, the smile fading from my face. "What's with the interrogation, Ty?" He shrugged, picking at a loose thread on his t-shirt. "No interrogation. Just checking in. Making sure you're not falling for some charlatan who just pretends to like your obscure documentaries." The reference to my love for quirky documentaries, another detail I'd shared about Liam, landed with a dull thud. This wasn't Tyler's usual banter. It felt pointed, almost aggressive. The easy camaraderie we usually shared was replaced by an odd tension, like a string pulled too tight. "He's not a charlatan, Tyler. We've had some really great conversations." I paused, searching for the right words. "I really like him." Tyler pushed his plate away, the scraping sound grating on my nerves. "Well, good for you, I guess. Just don't come crying to me when he turns out to be some emotionally unavailable commitment phobe who only wants to talk about his sourdough starter." He stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the tiles. "I'm heading out. Got a shift soon." He left the kitchen without another word, his footsteps heavy as he walked down the hall. I heard the front door click shut moments later. The silence he left behind was heavy, charged with unspoken frustration. I stared at my half-eaten toast, the buttery smell suddenly unappetizing. Later that week, at our usual Thursday night pub quiz, the atmosphere was similarly strained. Liam was there, his infectious laugh echoing across the table as he debated a question about obscure historical figures. Tyler, however, was unusually quiet, nursing his beer, his eyes darting between me and Liam with an intensity that made me squirm. "Okay, final question," the quizmaster boomed. "Which famous scientist once said, 'Logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere'?" Liam, ever the enthusiast, instantly said, "Einstein." Tyler, leaning back in his chair, scoffed. "Please. That's like a basic Google search answer. Everyone knows that one." Liam, usually quick with a witty retort, just smiled politely. "Well, it's a good quote nonetheless." I shot Tyler a look. "Ty, come on." He ignored me, turning to the rest of our friends. "So, Marcus, still no word on when you're going to introduce us to your new, very interesting documentary buddy? Or is he too busy analyzing the socio-economic impact of artisanal bread?" The thinly veiled mockery wasn't lost on anyone. A couple of our friends exchanged awkward glances. Liam, bless his gentle heart, still managed a small, polite laugh. "I'm Liam, actually, and I just happen to enjoy a well-made sourdough." He extended a hand across the table to Tyler. Tyler looked at Liam's outstretched hand for a beat too long before taking it, his grip surprisingly firm. "Tyler," he said, his voice clipped. The moment hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. It wasn't a joke anymore, it was a challenge, and I had no idea why. Chapter 4. Late Night Calls. The digital clock on Marcus's nightstand pulsed 2:17 a.m. Sleep teetered on the edge, his mind replaying Amelia's effortless laugh over dinner, the fleeting touch of her hand reaching for the bread. It felt light, uncomplicated, precisely what he thought he craved. Then his phone buzzed, a sudden jolt. He fumbled for it, the screen a stark rectangle of brilliance in the dark. Tyler. A familiar tremor, a blend of concern and something else rippled through Marcus. He answered, his voice thick with slumber. "Tyler, everything okay?" "Yeah, fine, just couldn't sleep." Tyler's voice was raw, strained, as if abraded by shouting or weeping. Marcus pushed himself upright, drawing the duvet closer. "You sound anything but fine. What's wrong?" He attempted to steady his tone, but a knot of apprehension cinched in his stomach. Tyler rarely called this late, short of an emergency. "Nothing. Forget it. Sorry to wake you." Tyler sounded on the verge of disconnecting. "No, wait," Marcus interjected quickly. "Talk to me. You know you can." He heard a long, ragged exhalation on the other end. "It's just work," Tyler finally offered, the words lacking conviction. Marcus recognized Tyler's work stress voice, and this wasn't it. This hummed, with a deeper, more personal resonance. "Rough night at the station, big fire, a kid." Tyler's voice trailed off, followed by a distinct sniffle. "Oh, Ty," Marcus murmured, his own heart aching for his friend. "Was anyone—" "Everyone's fine, physically, but off. It was a close one. Too close." Tyler's voice fractured. "Made me think, you know, how quickly things can unravel." Marcus listened, offering quiet affirmations, a gentle, unspoken plea for Tyler to continue. He pictured Tyler in his small apartment, likely pacing, raking a hand through his perpetually disheveled hair. He understood the wired aftermath of a tough call, the way adrenaline clung long after the immediate peril receded. But an undertone in Tyler's voice tonight felt different, more fragile than usual, almost needy. They talked for another 20 minutes, primarily about the fire, peppered with Tyler's abrupt non sequitur queries. "Are you seeing anyone new, Marcus?" he'd interjected, after detailing the structural damage to a collapsed roof. Marcus had hesitated then. "I had dinner with someone tonight, actually." He kept it succinct, wary of offering too much to Tyler, who invariably managed to morph even innocent details into future teasing fodder. Tyler had fallen silent for a beat too long. "Oh, right. Good for you." The words were flat, stripped of genuine warmth. Marcus chalked it up to exhaustion. After they finally hung up, the silence in Marcus's apartment felt heavier, imbued with a new gravity. He lay back down, but sleep remained elusive. Tyler's raw vulnerability had disquieted him. It wasn't merely the fear for the child. It was the intense, almost proprietary energy in Tyler's voice when he'd inquired about Amelia. Marcus tried to dismiss it. Tyler was just tired, shaken. He cared about Marcus, of course, as a friend. Nothing more. The next morning, Marcus sat at his desk, a spreadsheet blurring before his unfocused gaze, when his phone buzzed again. Another call from Tyler, but this time, a rapid-fire volley of texts. Tyler. "Hey, you busy?" Tyler. "Need a second opinion on something." Tyler. "Call me when you can." Marcus frowned. This was uncharacteristic. Tyler rarely texted mid-workday unless it was a bona fide emergency. He typed back, "Can't really talk right now, Ty. Everything okay?" The reply was almost instantaneous. Tyler. "Yeah, just wondering if you're free for a beer tonight." Marcus stared at the message. A sudden, unexpected invitation. After last night's intense conversation, this felt weighted. He already had plans with Amelia. They were going to that new French bistro downtown. A faint smile touched his lips at the thought of her infectious laughter. He composed a reply, carefully choosing his words. "Can't tonight, Ty. Got plans. Rain check soon?" A long pause then. Tyler. "Oh. Okay. Just like last night then." Marcus reread the text, a chill tracing down his spine. Just like last night then. The phrase hung in the digital ether, implying a pattern, a slight, a rejection. A prickle of annoyance stirred in Marcus. Tyler was being dramatic. He was entitled to have plans. He was entitled to see other people. Marcus. "What's that supposed to mean, Ty?" The response was quicker this time, almost defensive. Tyler. "Nothing. Just seems like you're busy these days. Anyway, never mind. Later." The conversation ended abruptly, leaving Marcus with a residue of unease. Tyler's mood swings, his possessive undertones, were growing increasingly difficult to ignore. A creeping discomfort settled over him, a premonition that something was shifting between them, and not for the better. The easy camaraderie they once shared suddenly felt fragile, strained by unspoken currents. He picked up his pen, but the spreadsheet remained a blur. All he could see was Tyler's agitated face in his mind's eye, and Amelia's genuine smile, a stark contrast that left him feeling increasingly torn. Chapter 5. The Unspoken Argument. The clatter of forks against ceramic plates echoed in the sudden quiet of Tyler's apartment. A lull, heavy and unfamiliar, had settled between them after I mentioned Sarah. It wasn't an accusation, just a casual observation about my new dating life. Yet the air had thickened, becoming almost viscous. Tyler, usually quick with a sardonic retort or a teasing jab, was meticulously cutting his chicken, his jaw tight. "She seems nice," he said finally, his voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. He didn't look up. The fluorescent kitchen light glinted off his dark hair, highlighting the rigid line of his shoulders. "She is," I affirmed, trying to inject enthusiasm into my tone. "Really funny. And she actually gets my obscure movie references." I chuckled, but the sound felt thin, unsupported. Tyler merely grunted. He picked at a stray pea on his plate with his fork, a motion entirely unlike his usual uninhibited eating. I watched him, a knot tightening in my stomach. This wasn't right. We'd always been able to talk about anything, tease each other about past flings, dissected disastrous dates with surgical precision. This wall, invisible but palpable, was new. "Everything okay, Ty?" I ventured, pushing a half-eaten potato around my own plate. He finally met my gaze, and his eyes, usually so expressive, held a distant, almost guarded look. Yeah, fine. Why wouldn't it be? His voice was sharper than necessary. You're quiet, I offered, then immediately regretted it. It sounded like an accusation. He pushed his plate away with a scrape that grated on my nerves. Maybe I'm just tired, Marcus. Had a hell of a shift. He stood abruptly, carrying his plate to the sink with an unnecessary force. The faucet hissed as he turned it on full blast, drowning out any further conversation. Later that week, Sarah and I were at the local brewery, enjoying the buzz of conversation and the taste of a new IPA. My phone buzzed. It was Tyler. Hey, I answered, stepping away from our table. What's up? Just checking in, he said, his voice a little too loud, a little too jovial. You out? Yeah, with Sarah. We're at Oakhaven. A beat of silence. Oh, right. Her. The cheerfulness evaporated. Just wondered if you were free later. Thought we could catch that game. I glanced back at Sarah, who was laughing at something a friend had said. Ah, man, sorry. We've actually got plans after this, too. Another pause. Longer this time. Right. Of course. Well, have fun. The line clicked before I could even say goodbye. The following Saturday, Tyler showed up unannounced at my apartment. I was in the middle of tidying up, preparing for Sarah's arrival. He leaned against my doorframe, arms crossed, observing my efforts with a critical eye. Nervous? He asked, a faint smirk playing on his lips. Just want things to be nice, I replied, fluffing a throw pillow. She's coming over for dinner. Dinner, huh? Fancy. He pushed off the frame, walking into the living room, his eyes scanning the space. He picked up a book from my coffee table, one Sarah had recommended. Reading this now? Yeah, it's pretty good, I said, feeling a prickle of annoyance. His presence, usually a comfort, felt like an intrusion. He put the book down, his gaze settling on a framed photo of Sarah and me, taken last week at the beach. We were laughing, caught mid-embrace. His expression tightened. You really like her, don't you? It wasn't a question, but a statement tinged with something I couldn't quite decipher, a mixture of curiosity and something else. Yeah, I do, I affirmed, meeting his stare. The air in the room seemed to thicken again, charged with an unspoken current. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of agitation I knew well. Just don't go getting stupid, okay? His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried an unexpected intensity. Stupid about what? I asked, my own patience wearing thin. He shrugged, turning away. You know, relationships. They mess with your head. He walked to the window, staring out at the street below. People change. I watched his back, the rigid set of his shoulders, the way he held himself. It wasn't just about relationships or people changing. This was about us, about him. The unspoken argument hung in the air, thick with unacknowledged emotions. A chasm opening between us with every unsaid word. I felt a pang of fear, a premonition of something vital slipping away. Chapter 6. A week of silence. The truck's rumble faded, leaving me on the porch in a vacuum of silence, infused only with the ghost of Tyler's cologne and the crisp echo of his controlled voice. A week stretched ahead, an expanse of 7 days. Daunting as an untouched canvas. I held the brush, but the palette remained blank. The initial fizz of excitement from my date with Liam had already flattened into a dull apprehension. Tyler hadn't called, hadn't texted. My phone, usually a vibrant hum of our daily exchanges, lay inert on the coffee table. A black, silent rectangle. I tried to construct a narrative for his quiet. He was busy, of course. Firefighters lived by unpredictable rhythms. Perhaps a grueling shift battling a county brush fire, or a relentless string of calls. For a brief, hopeful beat, I even convinced myself he was granting me space. A silent nod to my burgeoning connection with Liam. But the logic felt threadbare. a tattered comfort against a growing chill. By day 3, those rationalizations unraveled. A gnawing worry took root, manifesting in compulsive phone checks every 10 minutes, as if sheer will could conjure a notification. My apartment, typically a haven of calm, now felt cavernous, too quiet. The absence of his laughter, the easy current of our conversations, pressed down like a physical weight. I even tried to summon him, picturing him sprawled on my sofa, an ironic comment about the news on his lips, just to feel a spark of the familiar. Liam, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding within me, remained charming, attentive. Another date, this time at a cozy Italian bistro, was punctuated by his stories of an eccentric aunt and my genuine laughter. He held my hand across the table, his touch a warm, steady presence. Yet, even as I smiled and responded, a part of me felt untethered, straining for a phantom ring, a vibration that never came. Guilt settled like a bitter film. Here was a kind, handsome man offering authentic connection, and I was consumed by someone who didn't acknowledge my existence. Midweek, a small brown-wrapped package arrived. Tyler's distinctive, slightly slanted script adorned the label, and my heart soared, then plunged at the sight of his apartment as the return address. No note, no explanation. Inside, nestled amongst tissue, lay the worn copy of The Martian he'd borrowed months ago, along with a forgotten pair of my running gloves from his truck. It was a stark, unambiguous dismissal, a return of borrowed items, a meticulous tidying of loose ends. Final. Cold. That night, I walked to the park, the autumn chill biting at my exposed skin. Leaves crunched underfoot, each step echoing the hollowness within. I found our usual bench, the one where we'd spent hours unraveling everything and nothing, sitting there, the cold seeping through my jeans. I finally allowed the full sting of it to wash over me. Not just the hurt, but the profound confusion. What had I done? Was Liam the sole catalyst? Or had I blundered across some invisible boundary I hadn't even perceived? The following morning I awoke with a quiet resolve. The silence had served its purpose, stripping away my denial and forcing me to confront the stark chasm Tyler's absence created. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over his contact. I needed to hear his voice, even if it was just to hear him tell me to leave him alone. The unanswered questions were a burden I could no longer carry. It was time to break the silence, whatever the cost. I pressed call. 2 rings, then the click of voicemail. His voice, pre-recorded and utterly devoid of emotion, filled the speaker. "Hey, you've reached Tyler. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." I hung up without speaking, the dial tone a mournful hum in the quiet apartment. Chapter 7. Missing a piece. The scent of roasted garlic and basil filled Marcus's small kitchen, a welcome change from the usual takeout aromas. Across the counter, Leo chuckled, a low, warm sound that made something ease in Marcus's chest. They'd been dating for a month, a quiet, comfortable progression of dinners, movies, and shared laughter. It felt right. A lightness he hadn't realized he was missing. "Another glass?" Leo gestured to the nearly empty bottle of Chianti. "Go for it," Marcus said, stirring the pasta sauce. "We're celebrating." Leo raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in his eye. "Oh? What's the occasion?" Surviving another week of spreadsheets, Marcus grinned. "And meeting you." Leo's smile widened, a genuine warmth that was intoxicating. As he refilled their glasses, Marcus's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen. Tyler. A quick, almost instinctive pang hit him, but he dismissed it. Tyler was probably just checking in like he always did. "Everything all right?" Leo asked, noticing his pause. "Yeah, just Tyler," Marcus said, shrugging. "Probably wants to know if I finished that report for the community center." He silenced the phone, deciding to call Tyler back later. Tonight was for Leo. The next morning, the message from Tyler was less casual than Marcus expected. "Hey, where were you? Called a few times last night. You okay?" Marcus frowned slightly. Tyler knew he had a life outside of their shared projects. He typed back, "Out to dinner. Everything's fine. Why?" The reply was almost immediate. "Just checking. Haven't heard from you in a bit. Wanted to make sure you weren't holed up with a fever or something." It was odd, a little too solicitous. Marcus felt a faint prickle of irritation. He pushed it aside. Tyler worried. It was just his nature. Later that week, Marcus and Leo were walking through the park, hands brushing occasionally. A comfortable silence between them. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the quiet. "Marcus? Hey!" Tyler jogged towards them, clad in running shorts and a faded t-shirt, his usually neat hair slightly disheveled. He looked good, Marcus noted, reflexively, as always. "Tyler, hey," Marcus said, a polite smile on his face. He turned to Leo. "Leo, this is Tyler. Tyler, Leo." Tyler's gaze, which had been warm and open, seemed to subtly tighten as it landed on Leo. He offered a short, curt nod. "Leo, nice to meet you." Leo, ever gracious, extended a hand. "You too, Tyler. Marcus talks about you a lot." Tyler's grip was firm, almost overtly so. "Does he now?" His eyes flickered to Marcus, a question in them Marcus couldn't quite decipher. An awkward silence descended. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Tyler and I volunteer together on a few community projects," he explained to Leo, filling the void. "Yeah, we do," Tyler added, his voice flat. He turned back to Marcus. "I was just heading to grab a coffee. You guys want to join?" Marcus glanced at Leo, who offered a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Thanks, Tyler, but we were just heading back," Marcus said, trying to keep his tone light. "Got some stuff to do." Tyler's jaw tightened. "Right. Of course." He looked from Marcus to Leo, a strange, almost wounded expression on his face before he nodded curtly and jogged away without another word. "Well," Leo said once Tyler was out of earshot. "That was tense." Marcus sighed. He's usually not like that. Must be having a rough day. He tried to convince himself, but a knot of unease began to form in his stomach. Tyler had never been overtly rude to anyone before, least of all someone Marcus introduced him to. The next day, Tyler called, his voice tight. "So, you're seeing someone?" The abruptness took Marcus aback. "Tyler, what do you mean? We met him yesterday." "Yeah, I know, but how serious is it?" Marcus felt a surge of defensiveness. "What does it matter, Tyler? It's my life." A pause stretched between them, thick with unspoken things. I didn't know," Tyler finally said, his voice quieter, almost hurt. "You didn't say anything." "It's new," Marcus explained, trying to soften his tone. "And it's not something I usually broadcast right away." "Right," Tyler said, but it sounded hollow, unconvinced. "Look, I gotta go. Just call me later, okay?" The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, a growing sense of confusion settling over him. Tyler was acting strangely, possessively even. It was completely out of character. He wondered if he'd missed something, some subtle shift in their friendship, but couldn't put his finger on it. The easy camaraderie they'd always shared felt suddenly fractured. A piece was missing, and Marcus didn't know how to find it. Chapter 8. The shattering realization. The scent of roasted garlic and thyme, usually a comfort, felt heavy in the air of Marcus's kitchen. He watched Leo, his new boyfriend, effortlessly chop bell peppers, the rhythmic thud of the knife a counterpoint to the nervous flutter in Marcus's chest. Tyler was due any minute. This was the first time Tyler would encounter Leo, and Marcus felt a peculiar tightness in his throat, a premonition of awkwardness. "So, this firefighter friend," Leo said, a playful lilt to his voice as he glanced at Marcus. "The one you talk about so much. Marcus managed a weak smile. That's Tyler. He's a good guy. Just, a bit intense sometimes. He heard the faint rumble of Tyler's truck pulling into the driveway, and a sudden, illogical panic seized him. He smoothed down his shirt, running a hand through his hair. The doorbell chimed, a bright, insistent sound. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves, and walked to the door. Tyler stood there, a six-pack of craft beer in one hand, his usual easy grin fixed on his face. But as his eyes swept past Marcus and landed on Leo, who had emerged from the kitchen, the grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of something unreadable. "Hey, Ty," Marcus said, trying to sound casual. "Come on in. This is Leo." Tyler stepped inside, his gaze still locked on Leo. His handshake, when he finally offered it, was firm, almost crushing. "Tyler, nice to meet you." The words were polite, but the tone was flat, devoid of his usual warmth. The evening was a slow-motion car crash of strained politeness. Leo, ever gracious, tried to engage Tyler in conversation, asking about his work, his hobbies. Tyler offered curt, one-word answers, his eyes frequently darting to Marcus, then back to Leo, a strange, calculating expression on his face. Marcus tried to bridge the gap, interjecting with anecdotes, laughing a little too loudly at Leo's jokes. But the tension in the room was palpable, thick as the simmering stew on the stove. Later, as Marcus walked Leo to his car, the cool night air offered a small reprieve. "He's interesting," Leo said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Marcus sighed. "I'm really sorry, Leo. He's usually not like that." "It's fine," Leo assured him, squeezing his hand. "He just seemed surprised, like he wasn't expecting me." He gave Marcus a quick kiss, then drove off. Returning inside, Marcus found Tyler still sitting on the sofa, nursing a beer, the television silently displaying a nature documentary. The comfortable camaraderie they usually shared felt shattered. "What was that, Ty?" Marcus asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Tyler took a slow sip of his beer. "What was what? You were practically glaring at him all night, and you barely spoke. It was incredibly rude." Tyler finally looked at Marcus, his eyes dark and intense. "I just didn't realize you were seeing someone." The words were uttered with a quiet force that made Marcus flinch. "I told you I was going on dates. I told you about Leo weeks ago." "Yeah, but I guess I didn't think it was serious." Tyler's voice was rough, a barely contained tremor beneath the surface. He stood up, towering over Marcus, and for the first time, Marcus felt a flicker of unease around his oldest friend. "Look, I should go." Before Marcus could respond, Tyler was out the door, the heavy thud of it closing echoing in the sudden silence. Marcus stood alone in the living room. The lingering scent of roasted garlic now mingled with the bitter tang of unresolved conflict. The next few days were punctuated by an absence of Tyler. No texts, no calls, no impromptu visits. Marcus tried to reach out, leaving voicemails, sending messages, but they went unanswered. A knot of worry tightened in his stomach. This wasn't like Tyler. Then, a week later, Tyler appeared at Marcus's door unannounced, his usual uniform replaced by a worn t-shirt and jeans. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed as if he hadn't slept. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Marcus stepped aside, his heart hammering. Tyler walked past him straight to the living room and sank onto the sofa. He looked lost, utterly unlike the confident, self-assured man Marcus knew. "Marcus," Tyler began, his voice barely a whisper, I've been an idiot." He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "I didn't realize until I saw you with him. Until I saw you happy with him." He paused, taking a shuddering breath. "God, Marcus, I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air, shattering the last vestiges of Marcus's carefully constructed reality. The comfortable friendship, the easy laughter, the shared silences, all of it now recontextualized imbued with a meaning Marcus had been blind to. He stared at Tyler, his mind reeling, 1,000 unspoken questions swirling in the sudden, deafening quiet. Chapter 9. The Confession. The gentle chime of silverware against porcelain was the loudest sound in the cozy bistro. Tyler had championed the spot, a new downtown haunt with exposed brick and a menu striving perhaps a little too hard for artisanal. I pushed around my seared scallops, their flavor dulled by the knot of anxiety in my chest. Across the table, Sarah, all bright laughter and eyes that danced with mirth, regaled me with a tale of ceramic-related chaos from a pottery class. I offered the occasional nod and smile, but my focus kept straying to the empty seat beside me, Tyler's intended place. He'd promised to try and make it after his shift, if he wasn't too wiped. Sarah, having heard so much about my closest friend, had been eager to meet him. The vacant chair felt like a gaping void. When my phone vibrated, I snatched it up, a surge of hope anticipating his name. It was a text. Engine 7 got called out again. Looks like a long night. Sorry, man. Catch you later. A familiar thud of disappointment, laced with an emotion I couldn't quite label, settled in my gut. Sarah, noticing my crestfallen expression, reached across and gently squeezed my hand. Another emergency? She asked, her voice soft. I managed a weak smile. Yeah, business as usual. Over the subsequent weeks, Tyler's emergencies developed an uncanny knack for coinciding with nearly every plan I made with Sarah. A spontaneous dinner, a hike we'd meticulously organized, even a casual movie night at my apartment. Something invariably pulled him away. The explanations grew increasingly vague, the apologies more perfunctory. I found myself fabricating excuses for him to Sarah, even as a cold tremor of unease tightened within me. Was he deliberately avoiding her, or was it me? One crisp Saturday, Sarah and I ambled through the farmer's market, her arm comfortably linked through mine. The air hummed with the rich perfume of freshly cut blooms and ripe berries. We were midway through a laugh about a particularly boisterous vendor, when a deep, familiar voice cut through the cheerful clamor. Marcus? Sarah? I turned to find Tyler casually propped against a lamppost, a half-empty coffee cup in hand. No uniform, no telltale signs of a grueling shift, no sweat, no exhaustion. He was dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, looking utterly relaxed, as if he'd merely been enjoying a leisurely morning. My breath hitched. Tyler! I blurted. A strained smile plastered to my face. What are you doing here? I thought you had a shift this morning. His gaze flickered from me to Sarah, lingering for a beat on our joined arms. Shift got canceled last minute, he mumbled, his eyes avoiding mine. Thought I'd grab a coffee. The atmosphere between us suddenly thickened, heavy with unspoken questions. Sarah, sensing the abrupt shift, gently unlinked her arm. It's wonderful to finally meet you, Tyler, she offered, her voice as warm as ever. Marcus talks about you constantly. Tyler offered a tight, almost imperceptible nod. You too, Sarah. His eyes, usually so open and genial, were now shadowed, inscrutable. The silence stretched, becoming oppressive. I could practically feel Sarah's confusion, and my own irritation began to simmer. Well, I said, attempting to inject some normalcy back into the moment. We were just about to grab some fresh bread. Want to join us? Tyler shook his head, his jaw tight. Nah, I should probably head back. Got stuff to do. He pushed off the lamppost, his movements abrupt, almost dismissive. Later, Marcus. He didn't glance at Sarah again, simply melted into the throng without another word. I stood there, watching his retreating back, a profound sense of bewilderment washing over me. Sarah's hand found my arm again, a gentle, questioning squeeze. He seems intense, she observed softly. He's usually not like this, I replied, the words tasting like ash. Something's going on. The following day, I tracked him down at our usual haunt, the worn diner with its chipped formica counter. He was hunched over a lukewarm coffee, gazing absently out the window. I slid into the booth opposite him. "What the hell was that yesterday, Ty?" I asked, my voice low but firm. He flinched, startled, as though he hadn't heard my approach. He turned, his eyes rimmed red, a weariness etched around them that was utterly unfamiliar. "What was what?" he replied, his voice flat. "The market, the sudden cancellation of your shift, the way you just left. You've been avoiding me, avoiding Sarah. What's going on?" He drew a slow, deep breath, his knuckles white as he tightened his grip on the coffee mug. The diner hummed with the clatter of plates and a muted tapestry of conversations, but in our booth a profound silence had descended. He looked at me then, truly looked at me, and I saw a raw, unvarnished emotion in his eyes that made my stomach clench. It's hard, Marcus," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "Seeing you with her." My brow furrowed. "Hard? Why? You're my best friend, Ty. I thought you'd be happy for me." He shook his head, a single tear tracing a path down his grimy cheek. "I can't be," he choked out, his voice cracking. "I can't be happy for you because I'm in love with you, Marcus." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating, shattering every preconceived notion I had ever held. The distant hum of the diner faded into an indistinct drone. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the sudden, shocking silence. I stared at him, my mind reeling, struggling to reconcile the Tyler I knew with the man confessing such a profound, unexpected truth.